is a new year, and while we've all heard the phrase new year, new you, you don't actually have to change yourself to have your best year yet.
Keynote speaker, mental health and wellness advocate Kris Lacy joins us now to share how you can start this year off with a focus on self-renewal and purpose. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah,
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I love
And I like how you say when you're doing change like this, perspective is a big deal, because I think that is so true.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that I always say when working with my clients, because I essentially work with organizations to help them with employee burnout and wellness, and it all starts with mindset. And I always say your perspective is your power. That's something that you have to remember, because the way that we see ourselves, the way that we view ourselves, determine how we show up in the world. Yeah. And so it's important that we're being intentional about shifting our perspective, you know?
Mm-hmm. Let's talk more about burnout, because you've actually dealt with your own burnout journey, and that's sort of what brought you here today.
Yeah.
I think one of the hardest things with burnout is that you don't realize you're burnout until you're almost past the point.
Done.
And can you talk more about how you had that aha moment and how you turned that into what you do today?
Yeah, so, you know, it is one of those things, and trigger warning, it was one of those, I was very low, I was really dealing with some depression. It was in the wake of COVID, and being a person who works on mindset, mental health, I struggled with depression for a lot throughout my life. Mm-hmm. So what ended up happening was I recognized the signs. I was starting to experience some postpartum with my third child, and what ended up happening was I reached out to a bunch of therapists, and I wasn't getting any returned calls. And so I kind of had like a kind of breakdown moment, and it was extremely overwhelmed, kind of unexpected. What ended up happening was, though, I took the time to rest. And because I always say rest is a requirement and a right, but I had to learn that, because, you know, serving other people, you're constantly pouring out, you're doing the best you can to show for your family, your work, you know, and it just became too much for me. And so it was in that moment when I took the time and I gave myself permission to rest that I started to pay more attention to what my body needed. And I think that we just kind of go and we don't always pay attention.
I agree with that. Okay, so explain to me what the Renewed Life Framework is.
Yeah, so the Renewed Life Framework is what saved my life. And again, in that rest time, I kind of started to jot down, you know, what my process was. And this is the same thing that I take into organizations to help their employees. And so it's 3 parts. It's a sequence: renew, rethink, transform. It's renew your mind about yourself and your circumstances. You kind of shift your perspective. Instead of focusing on those negative thoughts, you start to pay attention to what you're ruminating on. And you might notice, for example, since we're talking about the new year, that you're telling yourself things like, you know, I hate exercise, or it doesn't feel good to me, because this is everyone wants to exercise in the new year, right? You'll notice that, and you'll take a shift from that to replacing that thought. You have the opportunity to reframe it with something more like, you know what, I'm learning to enjoy exercise this year, and it's a journey, right? So there's renew your mind. The second part is rethink what's possible. And the really powerful part about this is visualization, which is awesome because our brain doesn't know the difference between distinct imagination and reality. That's why dreams feel so real. Yeah. And so when you visualize, you know, something different for yourself, when it comes to exercise, you start to see yourself as showing up stronger, you know, showing up more effective and more present in your workplace, and then being more present, for example, with your family, and having more energy. And then the next part is you transform your life through your habits. Because you've created this new alignment and now you understand what's important to you, you can start to build systems or habits around what aligns with you. And so, for example, with exercise, I didn't like exercise, but I remember I love movement. I love to dance. Now I'm going to sign up for a simple class that's something that I can enjoy. Now I am exercising, but I'm doing something that, you know, that really does align with me and feels good, and I'm getting that movement in.
How important is it to build, in this process, to build authentic relationships? Would you say overall that's something that is critical to sort of renewing yourself?
Oh, for sure. Authentic relationships are necessary. Like I shared, you know, in my own life, you have to have people who, when you kind of crash, because we'll have moments, right? We lose motivation. Sometimes we forget who we are. Taking the time to build relationships where we have safe spaces, where we can communicate with others when we're going through something, is essential. And I think that, like, you know, because of COVID and our heavy reliance on social media, we're kind of isolated. We're more depressed and more anxious than ever. And it's important to have those authentic connections because it helps to reduce stress.
And I would say on the sometimes, not to cut you off, I think sometimes too, it's less about fixing a problem and more about just holding space for people to just authentically be who they are, good or bad, right? In those low moments as well.
I would say too, also on the flip side, is cutting the relationships that do not serve you well.
That's absolutely right. And that's really important. And that's why it's important to take the time to reflect. Everybody gets so excited about the new year and they're like, I want to do this. And brand new me is a lot. Like, how do you, where do you even start with that?
Right.
And also people are really quick to just cut off relationships. That's why it's important to kind of, when that renew part, you sit and notice what you're feeling, what actually felt good, what relationships made me feel joy, what environments, where did I feel uplifted? And the other thing is like, who am I spending my lunch break with? And which coworker is, you know what I'm saying, the person that I'm talking to the most, who's draining my energy and who's giving me some, you know?
Yeah.
I love that. You say that your wellness is your responsibility. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I think that a lot of us look externally, right, for comfort, for support, and that's great. We need that, but everything has to start with intrinsic motivation. And so we have to understand that our wellness is our responsibility if we want to, you know, have the life that we truly desire. The other part of that is we have a responsibility to the people we're called to serve. And so I think that when we focus on ourselves and kind of build ourselves up and prioritize our self-care, then we have the opportunity to be the light that we're really called to be in the spaces that we're in.
This
Fantastic.
is a great way to start the new year.
It is.
Yeah.
Think the right way.
Yeah.
KrisSpeaksLife.com is the website. You can get more details with Kris. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for
appreciate
having me,
it.
ladies.